Okay, so today we continue our ideas of social influence. Basically, it's how groups change and affect the ways we think, act, and behave. So we're going to talk about two of the main concepts today as conformity and obedience. So let's start with conformity. What exactly is conformity? When we talk about conformity, it's the degree to which members of a group will change their behavior, views, and attitudes to match and fit the views of the whole group. And this could be unconscious or overt peer pressure. That's to say, imagine yourself to be hanging out with a group of your friends. And they were talking about like a movie that just came out, and everyone was like, oh yeah, it's a great movie, a good movie. And it comes to you, what do you say? Do you say it's a good movie too? If you've seen it and you thought it was a bad movie, would you change your mind? Would you say that you dislike the movie in front of your friends? The idea is that when a lot of people in your group are doing something, it's kind of hard for us to not do it. To not conform has a certain kind of pressure with it. So when your mother tells you, well, just because your friends are doing something, if they jumped off a bridge, would you jump too? There's a lot of peer pressure involved to have you jump. And that's the idea of conformity. When we change our mind and do something that we might not believe in to fit the group. And that's conformity. To look at the effects of conformity, I'm going to talk about a series of research ideas. The first one I'm going to talk about is Sherif's light study. And this is the idea that, uses a kind of a visual illusion. It's called the autokinetic illusion. Basically, if you're in a very dark room and there's a spot of light, they shine a spotlight on the wall, even if the light doesn't move, just because we move our eyes and move our heads and eyeballs, we have the illusion that the light actually moves. So Sherif was interested in whether we could use conformity to change someone's perception of how fast this light is moving. Again, a visual illusion because the light doesn't move at all, stationary. So basically what happens is that Sherif puts people, like 3 people, in one room, and they look at the spot of light for a while, and they ask the first person, like, oh, how fast do you think the spot of light is moving? 2 feet per second, 3 feet per second, per minute? And then they again ask the next person. So right, imagine the second person, and you just heard the first person. Are you going to base your estimate around that too? Right? And the third person, so on and so forth. And what they found was that, yes, once the first person gave their answer, the group kind of cohered into the same answer. They gave the same estimates. So even though the light doesn't move, they all perceive it to move at the same rate based on the first person's response. They looked at some other kind of responses. So they purposely planted someone in there that would give a really high or really low response. So for example, oh yeah, it's moving 10 feet per second. And it's because there's no other stimulus in the room because it's very dark, that there's really no basis we know how fast this light was moving. So even a very fast estimate would make sense. And they found that the people really conform to the first high estimate. When you give a really high estimate, the next person tends to give a very similar high estimate too. And what they found was this. They have this revolving situation where one person goes in, another person goes in, so there's 2 people in this dark room, and the first person gives a really high estimate. And then after they estimate, this person stays, the other person leaves, and a new person comes in, right? And this person goes first now. So it's kind of saying that whether this high estimate would survive so many mutations. And they found that yes, after a high estimate is given out, it seems to survive like at least 6 or 7 rounds in the same room. So people kind of pass it along. So this is basically what we did. They observed the light for a few seconds, asked how much did the light travel. Either they did this in the group or alone. And because this is a stationary light, it's a bit purposely vague. There's no real answer to this, right? And so the Confederate is planted to give a really high 30 feet per second and influence the participant's response. And even when the Confederate left, the new participant is brought in with the original one, and the effect still lingers. So people still conform to this really high speed. And the problem with the study, even though it's very interesting in showing that the ability of one person to influence other people, it's that the stimuli itself was very vague. There's no real right answer involved in the situation. People can give any number and still be very influential. And so the question arises that if there's a clearly right answer, would people choose that? If there's a definite answer, would we still conform? In this case, you could argue that they conformed because people weren't sure what was going on.